So what if I told you that getting a client to say yes is actually like the fastest way to kill your deal?
I mean, it goes against everything we're taught. Right.
Totally. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are basically dismantling everything you've ever been taught about standard sales logic.
Yeah, it's a complete paradigm shift.
Because think about it. You are sitting across from a prospect. You're delivering this, flawless presentation of your services. The logic is undeniable. The ROI is just crystal clear. And you're pushing for that series of
Right,
yeses.
the classic micro agreements.
Exactly. But you aren't actually persuading them. You are biologically triggering their fight or flight response.
You're putting them in danger,
I know.
neurologically speaking.
Right. The walls go up, the temperature in the room just drops. And suddenly, despite your amazing pitch, the prospect starts hesitating. They hide behind like internal committees or they demand this massive discount. Why?
It's really a profound paradox in the professional world. We spend, weeks preparing the ultimate logical argument. The beautiful slide decks, the indisputable data
The
points.
glowing case studies.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do everything right on paper. But the human being on the other side of that table, they are not a rational economic machine.
Not at all.
We assume we're delivering our brilliant logic to a supercomputer, but in reality, we're delivering it to this highly anxious biological organism that's just constantly scanning the environment for threats.
And that is exactly our mission for this deep dive. We are going into a massive stack of source material today. We're talking behavioral economics research, deep neuroscience, and these really advanced negotiation playbooks to unlock the psychological framework to bypass those walls.
It's all about the science of tactical empathy and labeling.
Yes. Now, just to set the ground rules real quick, a lot of these sources, they draw from high-stakes environments, like crisis negotiation. But today, we are applying these tools exclusively to the world of business.
Right. No hostage situations here.
Yeah, exactly. We're looking at selling, providing services to clients, agency work, no life or death scenarios, just, the life or death of your quarterly revenue.
Which can feel like life or death sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. So to lay the foundation, where do we start?
Well, we have to establish a core philosophy from the behavioral economics literature. And it's a bitter pill for a lot of professionals to swallow.
Lay it on me.
In the world of business, logic does not drive decisions. Emotional safety drives decisions.
Okay, let's unpack this because that's huge.
It is. We operate under this collective delusion that we're highly rational creatures, right? Weighing pros and cons on a spreadsheet. But the reality of human neurobiology is that our emotions make the decision first.
First, okay.
And then our logic merely scrambles to justify that emotional decision after the fact. If a buyer doesn't feel emotionally safe with you, no amount of brilliant data will ever convince them to sign.
I think anyone who has spent like more than a month in client management has felt that exact wall. You give the pitch, the numbers make total sense, and they still give you the classic, we just need to think about it.
Yeah, the dreaded "we'll get back to you."
Right. But to bypass that wall, you can't just throw more features at them, which is what standard training says, right?
Yeah.
Just push harder on the value prop.
And pushing harder on logic when a buyer lacks emotional safety is precisely why standard techniques fail. It results in ghosting, stalled deals, margin compression. Before we learn the exact words to say, we have to look under the hood.
You have to understand the hardware.
Exactly, the biological hardware of the brain sitting across the table. And the neuroscience here is fascinating, though. Slightly sobering.
I mean, we've talked about the fight or flight response in other deep dives, the idea that humans are wired to detect danger. But how does that translate to B2B? Because if I'm pitching a sophisticated buyer in a nice climate-controlled boardroom,
Yeah, they know you're not a physical threat.
right, they know I'm not going to physically attack them, so what is their brain doing?
It's doing exactly what it's done for the last 200,000 years. According to evolutionary psychology, the human brain is roughly 75% negative.
75%.
Yeah, our default mode is pessimism. Dr. Rick Hansen, he's a neuropsychologist, he famously said the brain has Velcro for negative experiences and Teflon for positive ones.
Velcro for the negative. That's a great visual.
It's a survival mechanism from the Pleistocene epoch. Think about it. The cost of a false positive, assuming the rustling in the bushes, is a saber-toothed tiger when it's just the wind.
You just get a little scared and run away.
Exactly, you survive. But the cost of a false negative, assuming it's the wind when it is a predator,
You die.
you get eaten,
Yeah.
you don't pass on your genes. So we are the descendants of the most anxious, hyper-vigilant hominids that ever lived.
Okay, so we've inherited this incredibly anxious wiring, but back to the boardroom. They aren't running from a tiger, they're looking at my software proposal.
To the amygdala, which is that little almond-shaped cluster in the brain that processes fear,
Right.
there is virtually no difference. The amygdala doesn't distinguish between a physical threat to your life and a psychological threat to your autonomy, your status, or your resources.
Oh, wow. So when they feel pressured by my pitch?
Yes. When they sense you're trying to extract money from their budget or force them to change their operational status quo, the amygdala flares up. And here is the single most critical piece of data for anyone in business. When that fight or flight response activates, the brain begins a process called amygdala hijack.
Amygdala hijack. What does that actually mean physically?
Blood flow, oxygen, and electrical activity literally move away from the prefrontal cortex.
And the prefrontal cortex is that's the logical analytical center, right? The part that does the math.
Precisely. The part you're trying to appeal to with your beautiful data points is suddenly starved of resources. When a buyer gets defensive, their IQ literally drops.
That's wild. They become temporarily less intelligent.
Biologically, yes. They are physically incapable of processing the complex logic of your pitch. You're speaking to a wall of defensive neurochemicals.
Okay, I've always conceptualized this it's like trying to stream a 4K ultra high definition movie to a computer that has actively disabled its Wi-Fi receiver.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right, because you can have the best movie in the world. You have fiber optic internet on your end, pushing all this beautiful 4K data, the ROI calculations, the case studies, but the receiver is turned off. The data just bounces off a brick wall.
And to take your Wi-Fi analogy one step further, when the amygdala flares up, it's not just turning off the receiver, it's actively broadcasting a jamming signal.
A jamming signal.
Yeah, it's actively looking for reasons to reject your data.
Yeah.
Your presentation is the 4K movie. The amygdala is the jammer. And tactical empathy is how you disable the jammer and turn the Wi-Fi back on.
Okay, let's define tactical empathy then, because I know a lot of people get confused here. When you hear empathy in a corporate context, you think of sympathy.
Right, feeling sorry for them.
Yeah, like giving them a hug or just agreeing with whatever the client says so they don't get mad. But our sources draw a really sharp line here. Tactical empathy is not that at all.
No, it's vital to separate empathy from sympathy or agreement. Sympathy is an emotional reaction. Agreement is a logical concession.
You're adopting their worldview as correct.
Exactly. But tactical empathy relies on cognitive empathy. It is the deliberate, strategic act of recognizing their perspective, understanding the emotional rules they are operating by. And this is the key, vocalizing that recognition back to them.
Without necessarily agreeing with it.
Without agreeing at all, just observing it.
The vocalization is the key, isn't it? Like, it's not enough for me to just sit there nodding and quietly understanding their pain. I have to say it out loud.
The vocalization is the entire mechanism of action. When you accurately identify the negative emotions a buyer is facing and voice them out loud, it acts as a neurological circuit breaker.
A circuit breaker.
It signals to their primitive brain, this entity sees the environment exactly as I see it. Therefore, they are in my tribe. They are not a predator. The threat response diminishes, and the prefrontal cortex comes back online.
Think about our listeners who are, say, project managers dealing with client relations. You're managing this massive software build, and the stakeholder on the client side is just visibly vibrating with anxiety about the launch timeline. Every meeting, they're demanding updates, micromanaging everything.
Creating total chaos.
Exactly. And the standard PM logic is to just pull up a Gantt chart. You point to the chart and you say, look, phase 2 is complete. We have a 2-week buffer. There's no need to worry.
And how does that stakeholder usually respond?
They get more anxious. They start arguing with the chart. Well, what if the server migration fails? What if the team gets sick? They dig their heels in because they feel dismissed.
Because you are arguing with their reality. Their reality, driven by their hyperactive amygdala, is that their job is on the line if this launch fails. Your logic feels like an invalidation of their fear.
So if we apply tactical empathy, we put the Gantt chart away for a second. We map their emotional reality.
Right.
So instead of proving them wrong, I'd look at them and say something like, it seems like the ripple effects of a delayed launch are keeping you up at night, and you're feeling an immense amount of pressure from your executive team to ensure this goes flawlessly.
Look at the difference there. You didn't agree the project was going to fail. You didn't offer sympathy. You simply observed the dynamic and labeled it.
And when I vocalize that fear, I'm not reinforcing it.
No, you're draining it of its power. You're standing shoulder to shoulder with them, looking at the same scary cliff edge. Their brain syncs with yours. They drop their defensive posture and almost always say, yes. Exactly. If this doesn't ship, my boss will have my head.
And suddenly we aren't fighting each other. We are united against the problem. The Wi-Fi is back on, and now I can actually pull up the Gantt chart.
Because you established emotional safety first.
Which brings us to the mechanics of what I just did in that scenario. I used a very specific phrasing. It seems like this is the core tactical tool of this whole framework, right?
Yeah.
Labeling.
Labeling is the ultimate diagnostic and diffusing tool.
Mm.
But it's highly structured. You don't just wing it. A true label has to begin with specific, neutral phrases.
Like what?
The tested list includes, it seems like, it sounds like, it looks like, or it feels like.
Why are we so restricted to just those phrases? It feels, I don't know, a little repetitive if I use it multiple times in one meeting.
The repetition is totally invisible to the buyer if your delivery is genuine. But the reason we use them is because they are profoundly soft and non-judgmental.
Oh, because it's just an observation.
Right. If you use a label and you're wrong, which happens, the client won't feel attacked. If you say, it seems like you're worried about the timeline, and they aren't, they'll just naturally correct you. They'll say, no, the timeline is fine. I'm actually looking at the integration costs.
So you still extract really valuable information without damaging the rapport. Because I only said, it seems like. It was a hypothesis, not a diagnosis.
Exactly. But there is a massive trap here. The absolute biggest mistake you can make with a label is using the word I. Never say, I'm hearing that you're frustrated, or I think you're worried.
Why is I so toxic in this context? Because a lot of corporate active listening training teaches you to say exactly that.
Because I instantly shifts the spotlight away from the buyer's reality and directly onto your ego. When you say, I'm hearing that you're frustrated, the subconscious message is that your ability to hear them is the most important thing happening in the room.
It makes it about me, the brilliant, empathetic seller, instead of them experiencing the pain.
Exactly right. It creates this immediate subtle defensiveness. By removing the I and just saying, it seems like, you become a neutral mirror. And there's hard neuroscience backing this. Yeah, Matthew Lieberman, a neuroscientist at UCLA, he did these profound fMRI studies on what he calls affect labeling. He put subjects in an MRI machine and showed them pictures of angry or fearful faces. Predictably, their amygdalas lit up.
Right.
But when he asked the subjects to simply click a button that applied a word to the image like angry or fearful, the amygdala activity measurably decreased, and activity in the prefrontal cortex increased.
Wow. So simply attaching a word to a negative emotion biologically suppresses the brain's alarm system?
Yes. Naming the negative emotion diffuses it. Naming a positive emotion reinforces it. But the label is only the first half of the technique. The second half is where most people fail miserably.
Okay, what's the second half?
After you drop a label, you must immediately deploy dynamic silence.
Shutting your mouth.
Yeah.
Which is agonizing for salespeople.
It is agonizing. We're conditioned to view silence as this awkward void that we have to fill. But once you deliver the label, it sounds like you have some hesitations about the ROI. You must let it land. You have to pause and count to 4 in your head.
I have ruined so many labels by stepping on them. I'll drop the label, feel the silence stretch out for like 2 seconds, panic, and then start talking again. It sounds like you have hesitations about the ROI. And, you know, that's normal, but let me show you this case study.
And the moment you start talking, you crush the label. You interrupt their internal processing. To the buyer, that silence is deeply productive. You just shined a spotlight on a complex emotion they might not have fully articulated yet.
They need a few seconds to examine it.
Yes. When you jump in to rescue them from the silence, you rescue them from the exact reflection you needed them to do.
Think about a typical SaaS software demo. You're 20 minutes in, clicking through the dashboard, showing off the interface, and you look at the prospect, and they're leaning back, arms crossed, completely blank face, giving you nothing.
The instinct is to talk faster, click faster,
Drown them in the product until they smile.
which just alienates them further.
Right. So instead, we use the label, we stop the demo, take our hands off the keyboard, we look at them and say, it seems to me that you're not overly impressed with what I'm showing you so far. And then dynamic silence.
It's a breathtakingly confident move.
Yeah.
And it gives them a completely safe off-ramp. They don't have to awkwardly interrupt you to say the product doesn't fit. You called out the elephant for them.
And because I invited the negative truth, they'll lean forward and say, it's not that I'm unimpressed, it's just that your reporting module doesn't integrate with our legacy database. Boom.
You just gathered the exact intelligence you need to save the deal.
And it doesn't even have to be spoken aloud. I noticed this with UX and UI design recently. Companies like Slack or Gobibo They use the psychology in their error messages. When a user messes up a login, it doesn't just say error 404, a bad request.
Right.
That makes people feel stupid and angry.
Right.
The prompt actually uses a label. It says, it seems like you're having trouble finding that channel, or it looks like we lost the connection.
That is a brilliant observation. They're using conversational labels to guide users through friction points smoothly. Even without a human voice, it seems like, establishes empathy and diffuses frustration before the user churns from the app.
Okay, so labeling is incredible for diagnosing emotions you observe in the moment, crossed arms, a digital error. But what about the negative thoughts that, the buyer is bringing into the room before the meeting even starts?
This is where we transition to proactive strategy. We use a tool called the Accusation Audit. And of all the frameworks in our sources, this one requires the most courage.
What is it?
It's the comprehensive cataloging of every terrible, unfair, skeptical thought the counterpart might be harboring about you or your company.
And what do you do with this horrific list?
You state them out loud. You preemptively accuse yourself of all of them using labels before the buyer can even think them.
Okay, I have to push back here. This is the tactic that gives people vertigo. If I walk into a meeting with a new corporate client and I start explicitly listing all the reasons they shouldn't trust me, how does that not just plant the idea in their head?
It's a common fear, but the data supports the exact opposite. In psychology, there's a concept called inoculation theory. You cannot plant a negative emotion that isn't already naturally occurring in that environment.
Okay.
Remember, the brain is wired for threat detection. If you are a vendor asking a company for capital, they already have negative assumptions about you. They're anticipating the hidden fees, the aggressive tactics.
So they're walking in wearing armor.
Exactly. And attempting to ignore that armor, pasting this overly enthusiastic veneer over the situation, it keeps their amygdala on high alert. They think, this person is too slick, what are they hiding? But when you perform the accusation audit, when you name their exact fears, you steal the sting right out of them.
It's exactly like the final rap battle in the movie 8 Mile.
Oh, unpack that analogy because it is structurally perfect.
Okay, so in 8 Mile, Eminem plays B-Rabbit. He's a poor kid trying to make it in battle rap. In the final battle, he goes up against the champion, Papa Doc. B-Rabbit gets to rap first. Papa Doc is standing there, mentally cataloging all these brutal insults he's about to hurl.
Right.
But B-Rabbit takes the mic, and instead of attacking Papa Doc, he attacks himself. He aggressively lists every embarrassing fact about his own life, living in a trailer park, his friend shooting himself in the leg. He airs out all his dirty laundry, and then he hands the mic to Papa Doc, and Papa Doc literally has nothing to say. He chokes.
B-Rabbit weaponized his own flaws and robbed his opponent of ammunition.
Exact.
That is the precise mechanism of the accusation audit. When you state the negative out loud, the buyer's brain is robbed of the opportunity to attack you with it.
Yeah.
But in a business setting, it goes a step further. Because humans are socialized to be polite, their instinct shifts from attacking you to actually defending you.
Let's run this in a B2B scenario. You're a premium software vendor facing severe pricing pressure. The buyer demanded a massive discount. Match your competitor's price or we walk. The meeting starts, and they're waiting for you to start groveling. How do we execute the audit?
You start by meticulously labeling their darkest suspicions. You calmly say, before we get into the numbers, I need to call something out. You probably think we're just another vendor trying to maximize profit at your expense. It probably seems like we're ignoring your budget constraints and that we're completely disconnected from the operational reality you need to justify this purchase. You might even feel like taking this meeting was a waste of your time.
Just saying that makes my stomach drop. It feels like you're giving them the script to fire you.
It is terrifying.
Yeah.
But observe the reaction. They came in geared up for a brutal haggling match, and suddenly you just voiced every vicious thought they had with absolute calm. You ran directly into the conflict.
And the social conditioning kicks in. They don't attack. They soften. They usually lean back and say, whoa, okay, I wouldn't say it's a waste of time. We know you have a premium product. We're just under a lot of pressure from the CFO.
The armor comes off. They shift from adversarial attack to collaborative defense. You neutralize the volatility before showing a single ROI slide. Fear only grows in the dark. The accusation audit drags it into the light where it evaporates.
Okay, so labeling diagnoses emotions in the moment. The accusation audit preempts preconceived notions. But what happens when the prospect is actively trying to hide their reality? When their words say one thing, but the truth is entirely different?
This brings us to a foundational concept in behavioral communication, the 738-55 rule, established in 1967 by Dr. Albert Mehrabian at UCLA.
I feel like I've heard of this, but it gets misused a lot.
It is frequently misunderstood. The rule states that when a person is communicating regarding their feelings or attitudes, the meaning of the message is broken down into three components. 7% is the spoken words, 38% is tone of voice, and 55% is body language.
7% is the words. That means 93% of communication is nonverbal.
Yes, but the caveat is that this applies specifically when discussing feelings, or when there's an incongruence between what is said and how it's said. If I'm giving you directions to the airport, the words matter much more than 7%.
Right, that makes sense.
But if I tell you I am very happy with this contract while my arms are crossed and my jaw is tight, the rule is absolute. When the words don't match the tone and body language, the tone and body language are the truth. The words are the lie.
Because it's easy to lie with our words, but incredibly difficult to lie with our nervous system.
Exactly. You must be acutely attuned to these mismatches. But the sources also point out that our own 38%, our tone of voice, is our primary tool for regulating the buyer's nervous system. They call it the late-night FM DJ voice.
The late-night FM DJ voice, what is that?
It is a deep, slow, reassuring tone characterized by a distinct downward inflection at the end of your sentences.
Why does the downward inflection matter so much?
When you inflect upward at the end of a sentence, it sounds like a question. It communicates uncertainty or a desperate need for approval. It makes the listener anxious. But when you drop your pitch and inflect downward, you stimulate the vagus nerve in both yourself and the listener.
Oh, wow. Biological hacking.
It triggers the parasympathetic nervous system. It signals, I am in absolute control, you are safe, there is no threat. It communicates profound authority without aggression.
So instead of asking, can we finalize the proposal by Friday, with that high-pitched, panicky inflection, I drop my pitch and I say, we will have the final proposal to you by Friday. Downward inflection. It feels solid.
It anchors the room. Now combine this with reading the 738-55 rule to spot deception. Because buyers lie constantly in business, not out of malice, but because they're embarrassed about budget or lack authority.
The sources mention a behavioral tell for this called the Pinocchio effect.
Yes, when people are lying, their brain has to work significantly harder. The cognitive load is immense. Because they're anxious about being caught, they overcompensate. They use significantly more words than necessary to answer a simple question. They ramble.
They bury you in words so you don't see the hole in the story. Let's look at a scenario. I'm selling an enterprise software solution, $500,000 deal. I ask the VP of operations directly, do we have the budget approved for this implementation?
And if they don't actually have the budget, what does the rule and the Pinocchio effect look like?
The buyer physically shifts in their seat. 55% body language discomfort, their voice pitches up slightly, 38% tone anxiety, and then they say, yes, absolutely, we definitely have the budget. You see, our Q3 financial health has been stellar, and the board has been very clear that digital transformation is a priority, so capital expenditure is highly fluid right now. And they keep talking for 3 straight minutes.
The Pinocchio effect in full swing. They used 100 words when yes would have sufficed. The 93% nonverbal reality screams that they do not possess the checkbook.
So what's the tactical move? Do I call them out? I think you're bluffing. Let me talk to the CFO.
If you call them a liar, you trigger their amygdala, humiliate them, and lose the deal permanently. Instead, we use a mirror combined with a label. Mirroring is simply repeating the last 1 to 3 critical words of what they just said, using an inquisitive upward tone.
Okay, so they finish their 3-minute ramble. I stay calm, use the DJ voice, and mirror, have the budget.
Perfect. The mirror triggers a biological compulsion for them to keep talking and explain themselves. Their cognitive load is already maxed out from the lie, so the facade cracks. They might stutter, well, the funds are earmarked in the general IT budget. And right there, you drop the label.
It sounds like there might be some internal hoops to jump through to get those specific funds released.
Elegance. You didn't call them a liar or attack their status.
We gave them a face-saving off-ramp.
Yes. By labeling the internal whoops, you blame the faceless bureaucracy. You align with them. They can sigh and say, yeah, honestly, the CFO put a freeze on anything over 100K. You uncovered the truth without a single aggressive shot.
Which is the perfect transition, because once we've established safety and navigated the deception, we actually need to guide this client toward a decision. And this brings us back to the hook of the whole deep dive. Every modern sales guru preaches getting to yes. The micro-agreements get them conditioned to say yes. But our sources say this is biologically backwards.
It is a profound misunderstanding of human autonomy. Think about how you feel when a telemarketer calls at dinner and asks, "Are you interested in lowering your monthly utility bill?"
I feel an immediate spike of anxiety. I know if I say yes, they're going to use it as a trap. I'm looking for the hidden hook.
In modern business, yes has become a trap. It's a commitment word, and commitment triggers the amygdala. They wonder what leverage they just surrendered. But think about the biological reaction to no. How do you feel when you get to say no to a salesperson?
Incredibly safe. If I say no, nothing changes. The status quo is preserved.
No makes people feel safe, protected, and entirely in control. Their heart rate actually goes down. Therefore, the tactical move is to stop hunting for yes and intentionally engineer no-oriented questions.
Instead of asking a question where the answer I want is yes, I flip the phrasing so the answer I want is no.
Correct. You formulate it so that a no answer actually advances your objective. It gives them the ego boost of rejecting something while practically agreeing to the next step.
Let's run a scenario. You're a commercial real estate broker. You found the perfect office space for a corporate client, but they're dragging their feet on the letter of intent. The yes-driven approach is asking, are you ready to move forward?
Which puts terrifying pressure on them to commit to a multi-million-dollar decision right then. They'll dodge it. We need to check with the board.
So I trigger the safety of no. I call them and ask, is it a ridiculous idea to draft up the preliminary paperwork just to see what the terms would look like?
A brilliant no-oriented question. To answer that, the client gets to exercise their autonomy by saying no. No, it's not a ridiculous idea. They feel in control. But practically, what did they just authorize you to do?
They gave me permission to draft the paperwork. I got the exact result I wanted, but they feel like they are driving the bus.
Exactly. Or if they're ghosting you, you can use a provocative, no-oriented question. Have you given up on finding a new office space this quarter?
Oh, that challenges their identity. No executive wants to admit they gave up. They'll immediately say, no, we haven't given up. We've just been swamped.
And by saying no, they actively re-engage themselves in your process. It completely strips away the adversarial sales pressure.
Stop hunting for yes. Make them feel safe with no. That's a massive shift. Okay, so we've established safety. We've used no to move forward. Now we need to lock in true alignment and handle aggressive demands. We need to generate the ultimate epiphany. The sources make a massive distinction between a buyer saying, you're right and that's right. What's the biological difference?
The difference is the gap between a stalled deal and a closed deal. When a buyer says you're right, it sounds like agreement, but it's actually a polite, highly effective dismissal. It's what people say to their spouses to end an argument. It means, I concede logically. Now please stop bothering me.
Ouch. So when they say, you're right, they're just brushing me off?
Almost always.
Yep.
But that's right is an entirely different neurological event. It is an epiphany. It's the sound of a human feeling completely profoundly understood. When they say that's right, they're saying you see their reality exactly as they do. Their brain is flooded with oxytocin, the bonding hormone.
How do we trigger
That's right.
through a tool called a summary. A true summary is a combination of a label identifying their underlying emotions and paraphrasing, repeating the factual reality in your own words. You exhaustively summarize the obstacles until they have nothing left to add, and their only possible response is, that's right.
And once we hit that deep alignment, how do we handle severe price cuts? The sources talk about calibrated questions.
Calibrated questions are open-ended questions, starting almost exclusively with what or how. They force the buyer to pause, engage their prefrontal cortex, and empathize with your position. And the ultimate calibrated question is, how am I supposed to do that?
How am I supposed to do that? I've got to be honest, if I'm facing a procurement officer demanding discount, and I say that, it sounds incredibly confrontational.
Yeah.
Like I'm picking a fight. It absolutely can be, which is why we must return to the 738-55 rule. Delivery is everything. If you say it with sarcasm or an upward inflection, well, how am I supposed to do that? It's a toxic attack. But if you deliver it with the FMDJ voice, with genuine deferential curiosity, how am I supposed to do that? It becomes a magic wand.
Let's run a high-stakes scenario. SaaS contract renewal. Procurement demands a 30% discount on your fee, or they migrate to a competitor. A 30% cut destroys your margin.
If you argue logic, you get into a haggling war and still lose 15%.
So I don't argue. First, I trigger, that's right, with the summary. It sounds like corporate-mandated strict cost cuts. You're under immense pressure to squeeze efficiency out of vendors, and if you don't secure these cuts, your KPIs are at risk.
Beautiful. The procurement officer sighs and says, that's right, it's brutal.
And then I drop the calibrated question, softly. downward inflection. I want to help you hit your goals, but how am I supposed to be your long-term provider of value and dedicate the engineering resources required to keep your data secure if you cut my fee by 30% today?
And then, dynamic silence. You just handed your problem to them. You didn't say no, you just asked how it mechanically works. You forced them to step into your shoes.
They have to solve my profitability problem.
Exactly. And because humans want to be helpful, they often negotiate against themselves. They might say, well, maybe we drop the premium 24/7 support tier, or they reveal hidden leverage. Honestly, my boss just told me I have to ask everyone for 30%. Just give me a 5% token discount so I can show I pushed back.
You force the hidden reality to the surface and protect your margin. It's the ultimate jujitsu move. But what happens when the buyer just disappears into the void?
Go sick.
You send the proposal, they say, looks great, and then crickets. You send the just checking in email, you feel like a stalker.
Ghosting happens because people hate conflict. It's emotionally easier to ignore you than deliver bad news. Those checking in emails attempt to induce guilt. Guilt creates negative emotion, making them avoid you more. To resuscitate a ghosted deal, use a pressure release label.
Let's look at the pandemic example from the sources. A service provider had 4 massive deals. The crisis hits, budgets freeze, prospects completely ghost him.
Their amygdalas are flooding with panic to save their own businesses.
So instead of a guilt-inducing check-in, he sent a one-line email labeling the shared crisis. We're going through a real shit show right now, and you're probably concerned you're going to lose some clients.
A masterclass in labeling the negative. He didn't ask for a meeting. He just named the terrifying reality.
And it worked. By validating their worst fears without asking for anything, he removed the pressure. All 4 prospects replied, and he closed all 4 deals.
For standard ghosting, the subject line can be blank. One sentence. It seems like this project is no longer a priority right now. Or, it seems like something came up that pulled your focus away.
It seems like this project is no longer a priority. That feels passive-aggressive to send.
It feels that way because you're anxious. But to them, it's an objective observation that releases pressure. And never underestimate a human's desire to correct you.
Oh, they don't want me to think their initiative is unimportant. They'll reply to prove me wrong. No, it's still a priority. My inbox has just been a disaster. Can we talk Tuesday?
You bypassed the guilt and restarted the dialogue without being annoying.
This has been an absolute masterclass. Let's synthesize. We abandoned the pushy yes train. We learned to deactivate the amygdala using labels and dynamic silence. We learned to boldly disarm fears with the accusation audit.
We learned to read the real room with the 738-55 rule and the FMDJ voice.
We embrace the safety of no and use calibrated questions to force the buyer to solve our margin problems. So, to you, the listener, remember, these aren't just sales tactics. They are the fundamental biological rules of human nature. Next time you sit across from a prospect, you aren't fighting their logic. You are navigating their emotional safety. When that wall goes up, stop pushing your 4K presentation. Focus on turning their Wi-Fi back on.
I will leave you with a final concept to mull over. If these tools work so flawlessly to disarm defenses and build trust, what happens when both the buyer and the seller are highly trained in these exact same techniques? If you sit across from a procurement officer who is also mirroring your words and labeling your emotions, does the negotiation cancel out into an endless stalemate? Or does it strip away the ego entirely, resulting in the most efficient, honest, and creative business collaboration possible?
Something to think about the next time you deliver that flawless presentation and you see the prospect hesitate. Until next time, keep diving deep.